I would like to start this presentation with a question. Do celestial bodies influence human beings? Buonafede Vitali Senior would have answered this question affirmatively, deeply convinced of the profound connection between natural astrology and medical knowledge, also defending astrology's epistemological and pedagogical role in the education of physicians. The aim of this lecture is therefore twofold. First, it explores how Buonafede Vitali understood the celestial influence on the human body, situating his ideas within the educational context that shaped his formation and the authors who most influenced his medical and philosophical position. Second, it examines why, in Buonafede Vitali's perspective, astrology represented a crucial pedagogical and epistemological component in the education of physicians, a necessary form of knowledge for understanding the correspondence between the microcosm and the macrocosm, and therefore being able to heal body and achieve a truly medical education. By doing so, this lecture invites a wider reflection on the transformation that reshaped medical knowledge during the 18th century, a period characterized by growing faith in scientific reason and universal laws, but also by the progressive erosion of the symbolic dimension of healing. So let's start presenting briefly the structure of today's talk. In the first part, I will introduce the eclectic character of Buonafede Vitali, as we said, contextualizing his intellectual formation within his educational environment and drawing a deception on manuscript sources and contemporary accounts that describe his work and the reputation. In the second part, I will explore Buonafede Vitali's conception of medical education and the role of astrology in the physician intellectual training through the analysis of the Dialogo in difesa dell'astrologia naturale from 1744, an unpublished manuscript attributed to Buonafede Vitali Senior and preserved in the Vitali Archive, a fount of the State Archives of Parma. Finally, we will return to the broader question guiding this lecture. So how does Vitali's perspective engage with or challenge the 18th century academic canon of medical training? So let's start with another question. So who is Buonafede Vitali? Buonafede Vitali Bonaventura Ignazio was born in July 3rd, 1686 at 10:30 in the morning in Busseto, near Parma, to Giuseppe Vitali, a member of the local patriciate, and Maria Carpi. He was described by Buonafede Junior as an illustrious man known to almost all of Europe in our century, who under the name of the Anonymous caused such a stir not only for his excellence in medical and chemical arts, but also for his almost universal knowledge. Carlo Goldoni, also in his memoirs, portrayed Buonafede as a man of good family who had received an excellent education and had been a Jesuit. Indeed, at only 12 years old, Buonafede defended philosophy at the University of Parma. Here, Buonafede Junior refers to the Jesuit school of San Rocco in Parma since the 1600, a state Jesuit university providing both secondary and higher education, built according to the Society of Jesus Ratio Studiorum and taught by Jesuit professors, but publicly funded and authorized by the state to confer academic degrees. To outline the cultural and educational context in which Buonafede's intellectual formation took root, it is worth noting that to this school of San Rocco was later added the Collegio dei Nobili, the most prestigious Italian boarding school of the 17th and 18th centuries. As it hosted students from the Jesuit school of San Rocco, it attracted young men from the ruling classes across the peninsula, becoming one of the major cultural centers of the Society of Jesus in Italy. It was here that Buonafede received his education, distinguishes himself by his rare eloquence and fluency of speech, for which even his rivals called him potenza in sermone. as he publicly answered on the spot every question proposed to him for more than 30 years. This solid education, as explained by Buonafede Junior, together with his mastery of the arts of the trivium, grammar, the art of speaking correctly, dialectic, the art of reasoning, dialogue, and argumentation, and most of all, rhetoric, so the art of public speaking and persuasion, of moving emotion through words and skillfully using them, would serve him well both in his career as an itinerant medico saltimbanco and in his relationship with patients, as Goldoni testifies. I wanted to make the acquaintance of the anonymous, not only for the pleasure of meeting this extraordinary man, but also his followers. One day, I went to visit him under the pretext of buying a little of his alexipharmic remedy. On this occasion, I raised several questions about the illness I had, or believe I had, and he quickly realized that mere curiosity had brought me to his house. He had a good cup of chocolate brought to me and told me it was the best medicine for my condition. I found much politeness and charm in his manners, and we chatted together for some time. He was as amiable in private as he was learned in public. So I invite you to keep this scene in mind, as we will revisit it at the end of this lecture to help us understand how Vitali translated his rhetorical and relational skills into a distinctive idea of healing. So how is this brilliant orator turned his curiosity towards medicine? Feeling displeasure for the cloister, as Goldoni said to us, he devoted himself to medicine. At the age of 18, perhaps also thanks to the influence of his uncle Antonio Vitali Buonafede, he changed his determination and turned to the study of medicine and chemistry, in which he was licensed, that is, matriculated in Parma. Therefore, alongside the learning of surgery, he cultivated an interest in chemistry, and in particular the chemetry, that is, the art of healing wounds by means of chemical preparation. During his stay in the Republic of Venice, while his father served as Castellan, he probably had the opportunity to come into contact with the semi-prohibited works of Paracelsus. After residing for some time with Count Gardani of Viadana, greatly devoted to chemistry, he went to Milan, recommended by him to Count Simonetta. Through his mediation, he obtained the position of chief surgeon of Caedus Dragoon Regiment. The title of chief surgeon represented the highest professional rank, identifying the surgeon endowed with fully autonomy of action, that is, with the power to perform any type of operation. Preceded in the hierarchy by the barber, authorized to perform phlebotomy and bloodletting, the assistant surgeon, qualified to incise abscesses and carry out cauterization, and the minor surgeon, permitted to administer enemas and ligate vessels. Finally, having moved to from Milan to Rome to serve Prince Odescalchi, he had the opportunity to deepen and penetrate the secrets of the chemical art, which, however, in Italy, could not yet be freely practiced and studied due to the conflicts with ecclesiastical auctoritas and the still dominant Counter-Reformation prohibitions. Perceiving the advantage of applying chemistry to medical matter, he decided to go to England, where Buonafede Junior said that the plague broke out in 1710. There he wrote a letter on the plague, printed in Verona by Tamarmani, where on page 12 he wrote, "Idest quod morbi contagiosi vermes in causam agnoscerent." That is, that they recognized worms as the cause of contagious diseases, opposing those who thought differently. This demonstrates Buonafede's adherence to the infectious disease theory, and such duality, which units his early adherence to the infectious disease thesis with his interest in the chemical and astrological philosophy of Paracelsus, reflects his tension between the emerging empirical experimental medicine and the enduring legacies of alchemical and cosmological knowledge. So to introduce Buonafede Vitali's perspective on natural astrology, which he said, among the human sciences is, without any opposition, by far the most difficult, and its connection with medical art, it is necessary to recall the works of Paracelsus, whose influence extended far beyond chemical experimentation. As I have briefly mentioned before, the influence of Paracelsus on early modern medicine was profound. He challenged established Galenic Hippocratic tradition and revolutionized the medical disciplines by integrating alchemy, astronomy, philosophy, and ethics into a cohesive epistemological framework that he called Grund. His philosophy of nature was grounded in the conviction of the correspondence between the microcosm and the macrocosm, a relationship in which the movements of celestial bodies, the composition of matter, and the dynamics of disease were all interconnected. Indeed, from Paracelsus' point of view, medicine should not rest upon such an unstable foundation as has been done up to now, but upon a Grund, a foundation conceived as a normative and epistemic base rooted in direct experience. From this Grund, he built an integrated system of four interrelated disciplines, which are philosophy, astronomy, understood as astrum or art of celestial wisdom, alchemy, and ethics. This framework enabled the physician to discern the hidden correspondence of nature, where the signs revealing both the origins and of disease and its remedies reside. In his Paragranum, that is his masterwork, Paracelsus outlines that medical knowledge should be grounded in what can be directly observed rather than in the auctoritas, which for him substantiates in unfounded theories or abstract reasoning. Paracelsus, in his masterwork, said, "The doctor must follow the disease just as the cow follows the trough. This demonstrates that the doctor must start from nature, not from speculation. Now nature is visible, while speculation is invisible. It is the visible that makes the doctor, not the invisible. The visible gives the truth, the invisible gives nothing." According to Paracelsus, it is through engaging with the visible and tangible aspect of nature, such as the human body and the progression of the disease, that a physician could truly understand and treat illness. This shift toward empirical observation rather than relying solely on the auctoritas was a cornerstone for his reform, elevating experimentation and sensory experience in the understanding of the human body. The centrality of direct observation of the body is particularly evident in Paracelsus' focus on the examination of urine and the pulse. From his perspective, urine contains with itself the entire physiognomy, the entire anatomy, he said. From human body, from his perspective, urine contains, while the pulse embodies the corpus of life, the urine contains the entire physiognomy and entire anatomy. Consequently, the physician must be able to recognize the property of urine with the same confidence, Paracelsus said, with which a showmaker fits show to last. This conception is further documented in Schroeter's German transcription of Paracelsian writings, preserved at Yale University in the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library, where the section De Urinis is entirely devoted to the classification of the various colors that characterize healthy urine. The title is De Coloribus Sana Urina. So, according to his belief on the interplay between macrocosm and microcosm, Paracelsus stresses that all these things are in a reciprocal relation. And the physician is therefore called not merely to separate this domain, but to acquire a profound understanding of both the inner and the outer worlds, and of the dynamic interconnection that unite them. Thus, philosophy embraces all organs and members, health and infirmity, so that alongside knowledge of the external world, there must be knowledge of urine. Alongside the firmament, the pulse is comprehended, physiognomy through the stars, chiromancy and the basis is on the basis of minerals, respiration derived from the winds of the east and the west, fever from earthquakes, and so forth. Addressing his fellow physicians, Paracelsus concludes, "Be a physician, therefore examine his urine, take his pulse, and on this basis judge the person, but not without a profound knowledge of the outward man, who is nothing other than heaven and earth." What then constitutes the essential canon that the physician must master in order, as Paracelsus says, to tame disease in the same way that a peasant fells a tree with an axe. It begins with the Grund, philosophy, conceived as the very foundation of medicine, which provides knowledge of the lower sphere and enables the discovery of the truth concerning the essence of the body and the earth. To this, Paracelsus adds astronomy for the wisdom of the higher sphere, alchemy with its transformative power, and the virtues or operative forces of nature. Through this integrated knowledge, the physician may come to a deep understanding of the essence of disease itself, always in conjunction with careful and precise observation. Alongside this epistemological program, Paracelsus also raised the question of accessibility of medical knowledge, which is very interesting in my perspective. He openly accused academic physicians of concealing medicine behind an incomprehensible jargon, both in the transmission of knowledge and in the prescription of drugs, thereby turning medicine into an analyst's domain. By contrast, in Paracelsus' view, where the physician is understood as the one who unlocks the secrets of both macrocosm and microcosm, medicine should be a universal knowledge. So Paracelsus said, so clearly set forth in the language of one's own homeland that the German might understand the Arab and the Greek the German. Acknowledging the influence of the celestial realm and the correspondence between the stars, humankind, and nature, Paracelsus affirmed, what difference is there between the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Saturn, and Jupiter in the heavens and their corresponding stars within man? Paracelsus ultimately draws attention to the deficits of contemporary medical training. Physicians, he argues, do not receive a complete education, for they remain ignorant of the true causes and the nature of disease. If, according to Paracelsus, the causes and remedies of disease ultimately reside in the stars, then it is upon the knowledge of the celestial order that medicine must ground its preparation. And so he affirmed, and since medicine cannot, without even, produce any effect, it must act through even itself. If therefore you have accomplished this separation, medicine will be subjected to the will of the stars, conducted and guided by them. That which belongs to the brain will be carried to the brain by the moon. That which belongs to the sleeping will be carried to the sleeping by Saturn. That which belongs to the heart will be carried to the heart by the sun. And those, the kidneys by Venus and the liver by Jupiter, while under dominion of Mars is found the bile. Such are the things, not only for these organs, but also for all the others, countless to name. Within this cosmological framework, a third discipline emerges alongside philosophy and astronomy, and it's alchemy. Alchemy is described as the art that brings nature to perfection, actualizing what grows within it for the sake of human well-being. It functions as the revealer of mysteria, of the occult processes of nature, and assumes a decisive role in the physician's education. Through alchemical practice, the physician gains access to the four arcana, prima materia, lapis, philosophorum, mercurium vitae, and tinctura. These elements are conceived not merely as abstract philosophical categories, but as concrete therapeutic agents in which both causes and cures are inscribed. Whereas alchemy is an art of refinement and discovery, pharmacy appears to him as a disorderly practice, where apothecaries indiscriminately mix substances, smearing and scraping them together without order or discernment. He goes so far as to claim that there can be no physician clumsier in the medical art than the one who makes concoctions in the pharmacy. So across Europe, the circulation of Paracelsus' work in the early 17th century sparked lively debates, but universities, particularly in Italy, remained deeply committed to Galenic and Hippocratic traditions. While the limitation of Galenic physiology became increasingly apparent, Italian faculties continued to uphold this authority, focusing instead on the anatomical research pioneered by Vesalius and his followers. This section was regarded as the foundation of medical inquiry, aimed to cataloging the body's structures, clarifying their functions, and examining the relationship between health and disease. Paracelsus himself positioned his reform in open opposition to university medicine, which he accused to perpetuate a sterile and inaccessible tradition. So this framework deeply influenced Buonafede Vitali's medical practice and perspective. So according to Vitali, what training should the physician receive, and what is the role of astrology in supporting the physician during medical practice? In Vitali's view, the integration between medicine and astrology was not merely theoretical. It had profound pedagogical implications. Indeed, in his Dialogo in difesa dell'astrologia naturale, two interlocutors, Adolfo and Fidelio, discuss what makes a true physician. The ideal they outline is remarkably humanistic and interdisciplinary, combining philosophy, philology, anatomy, and astrology into a unified vision of medical education. As Adolfo says, the physician must be expert in philosophy to adapt himself to the search for truth, and in the Latin language, without which he could not understand most of the books dealing with the scientific art. And he continues with an exact knowledge of anatomy, so that he may know what the human body is, which is the object of the physician. This triad, philosophy, language, and anatomy, reflects the traditional pillars of early modern medical education and attests to the Jesuit roots of Buonafide's education. Yet, this foundation is immediately followed by the fourth and crucial element, that's astrology. The insistence on astrology's necessity suggests that, for Vitali, cosmic literacy was as fundamental to the physician craft as anatomy or philosophy. The body could not be properly understood outside the celestial order, which grounded the epistemological legitimacy of astrology within the medical sciences, as Vitali himself wrote in the Dialogo. In short, whatever can happen to the human body as a body can all come from, indeed everything derives from, this celestial influence. This statement encapsulates his vision of the human organism and as a microcosm inseparably connected to the macrocosm through a web of astral correspondences. For Vitali, astral knowledge was not opposed to observation, rather it completed and deepened it. Indeed, understanding the celestial configuration affecting the body's humors, temperaments, and diseases was essential to interpreting the patient's condition and in its entirety. In other words, astrology provided what we might call a holistic epistemology, a framework uniting physiology, cosmology, and moral philosophy into a single continuum of knowledge. After defending the epistemological legitimacy of natural astrology, Buonafede turns to a more practical register, addressing directly the empirical, the practitioner who seeks to understand the natural and celestial causes of the disease. This pedagogical shift reveals the educational purpose of the work, to provide a complete and accessible manual, bringing together in one place what was otherwise scattered across difficult and erudite volumes. So Buonafede says, once the value of astrology has been demonstrated by the arguments above, and with it how necessary it is for anyone who wishes to practice natural medicine properly, one must be careful not to place in derision or to judge as useful, a useless labor or superfluous the study of astrology. And Buonafede explains, with the greatest possible clarity, the short method for erecting the celestial figure, making annual revolution, calculating transits, and performing all the other operations that belongs to it in order to conjecture from the aspect of the stars, combine, consider together, the temperament of human bodies, the tendency to the disease, their progress and the recession, the proportionate time for administering remedies, and to give judgment on critical days, a matter of such great importance to the practice of medicine as a whole. So only by mastering astrology, Vitali concludes, will the physician be able to honor himself on occasion and be useful to his patient. So emerging from these passages is not only Vitali's defense of astrology legitimacy within medical training, but also his pedagogical intent, his desire to craft a practical and accessible guide that would gather in one place all the knowledge he considered essential for the empirical, the self-taught practitioner, As he declares, nor is it superfluous that I here repeat those teachings that are found scattered in various authors, because, desiring to provide a complete work to the hands of my empiric, I must not allow that he be forced to turn to other texts than these, but that here he may find united and in order what is otherwise seen dispensed in vast volumes difficult to understand. What an astronomy and astrology are, their object and their aim, is the first chapter of this text. And I think here emerges another time as in Paracelsus the accessibility of medical knowledge and medical profession. So this first chapter, what astronomy and astrology are, their object and their aim, begins with two definitions that distinguish these two fields of knowledge while simultaneously binding them together, as both are necessary to understand the reciprocal relationship between macrocosm and microcosm, between the stars and the human body. As Vitali explained, astronomy is an art by which one considers the magnitude of the stars, measures the place where they are, and observes their motions. Astrology is that by which one considers the effects of astrologer must first be an astronomer. Effects of the influence of the said stars, which differ according to the diversity of their aspects. Thus, the astrologer must first be an astronomer. That is, he must know well how to calculate the motions of the stars in order to know their position, and then conjecture those natural effects of which the light that reflects differently in them is the cause. From what has been said, it is known that the object of the astronomer is the star considered in motion, and its end is the knowledge drawn from the quantity of motion measured according to determined divisions. But the object of the astrologer is the influence, and the end, the conjure of those effects that such influence may produce upon our bodies. In this passage, Vitali not only distinguishes, but hierarchically orders the two disciplines. Astronomy provides the mathematical and descriptive foundation, while astrology interprets the causal and physiological effects of celestial movements. Both are necessary for the physician, who has a mediator between heaven and earth, must read in the stars the signatures of diseases and the rhythm of healing. So in the last part of this lecture, I would like to explore the following question. How did Buonafede Vitali's perspective on the influence of astrology on medicine shape his medical practice, and how did such a perspective coexist with his empirical approach? So Buonafede Vitali Junior said, in that city, that's Genoa, in the year 1714, at the age of 28, he presented himself to the public for the first time under the name Anonimo, responding to every question and speaking and disputing on any subject proposed to him. And then Goldoni said, this extraordinary man, to whom no science was foreign, possessed an excessive vanity in displaying the breadth of his knowledge. And since he was a better speaker than writer, he abandoned the honorable position he held and chose instead to become a monk, so a medico saltimbanco. Buonafede Vitali Senior, whose education and intellectual intersected both with the auctoritas tradition of the medical canon and with heterodox voices such as Paracelsus, adapted these principles to his changing epistemic landscape, to the changing epistemic landscape of 18th century medicine. He envisioned a physician who was at once a natural philosopher, an anatomist, and an empirical, capable of combining medicine, clinical observation, and sperimentazione sensibile. Indeed, as we saw in the first part, Buonafede also appears as a physicus, a learned physician with a solid theoretical knowledge of therapeutic substances. Now Buonafede appears as a traveling healer and vendor of low-cost remedies, producing and solving his secrets both in public squares and private salons, as witnessed in the manuscript Rimedi Particolari, preserved in the Vitali Archive at the State Archive of Parma, where the anonymous records secrets inspired by Oriental medicine and by alchemical and astrological recipe books. Goldoni said in Milan, the Anonymous had the satisfaction of seeing the square where he performed always crowded with people on foot and in carriages. But since he learned where those who bought the last, it was necessary to furnish the stage with attractive objects to entertain the ignorant public. In the context of duty law reforms shaped by Enlightenment ideals and supported by Maria Theresa Austria, where the duchy underwent a profound modernization of its educational and medical institutions and the establishment of public hospitals and anatomical theaters, signed the rise of clinical empiricism. Vitali's writings show that this new empiricism did not entirely displace the other astromedical paradigm. Rather, the two coexisted in productive tension. And as Cosmacini reminds us, the 18th century was marked not by a clean break, but by multiple overlapping epistemic regimes. In this sense, the Vitali case offers a window into what we might call a transitional epistemology, one that sought to integrate rational observation with symbolic and cosmic interpretation. So to conclude, I would like to recall the anecdote from the first part of this lecture and from the first meeting between Buonafede and Goldoni. And this anecdote, I think, captures the plural and holistic conception of care that characterized Vitali's approach. The physician's prescription, a cup of hot chocolate, reveals a profound understanding of the psychosomatic dimension of illness. As Cosmacini notes, such gestures point to a form of early psychotherapeutic medicine in which comfort, relational warmth, and sensory pleasure were integrated in the healing process. The chocolate, as a pleasant and comforting pharmaceutical, functioned as a kind of effective placebo, integrating body and mind through an act of symbolic and sensorial resonance. From Paracelsus to the Vitali family, we observe a persistent attempt to integrate visible and invisible causes, empirical observation, and symbolic interpretation, and cosmic influence and clinical practice. The Vitali manuscripts reveal a plural epistemology where astrology, anatomy, alchemy, and philosophy were not contradictory, but complementary, and the physicians were expected to navigate these overlapping domains, cultivating both observational skill and cosmic literacy. Finally, the anecdote of Goldoni and Vitali, the cup of chocolate offered as a therapeutic agent, reminds us that medicine was not only a science, but also a social and relational practice. Thus, the question with which we began, so do celestial bodies influence human beings, cannot be answered in absolute terms. In the context of the 18th century medicine, Buonafede Vitali's work shows that the celestial and the empirical were not opposing categories, but coexisting epistemic frameworks. His writings illustrate a translational moment in medical thought, one in which observation and experiment coexist, marking the two complexity of Enlightenment medicine. So this concludes the main body of today's lecture, and thank you for your attention.